By the time you finish watching this video, a part of you will have disappeared. That version that believes you need to be understood in order to exist. You're trapped in the paradox of the ship of Theseus, a Greek hero who had a ship. He sailed while the planks rotted. With each rotten plank, the crew replaced it with a new one, until none of the originals remained. The question, was it still the same ship? You do this to yourself. Every time someone doesn't understand you, you rip out a piece of who you are. You replace it with something they'll accept better. You repeat this until you forget which planks were yours and which ones you installed to please others. You look at yourself and no longer know who's there. The original ship or the copy you built seeking approval. Today we're going to talk about how to stop replacing your planks just because nobody understands the boat you really are. Nietzsche once said that those who dance are considered crazy by those who can't hear the music. You hear that music, you always have. The problem is that most people around you are tuned to a different frequency, and there's no volume loud enough to make your melody reach their ears. This isn't a metaphor to make you feel better. It's the raw description of a reality that hurts. You see layers that others don't see. You question what others accept without thinking. You feel depths that others don't even know exist. And that puts you in a position of loneliness that no company can solve. You can be at a dinner with 10 people, laughing, talking, seeming integrated, and still feel that unbridgeable gap between you and everyone there. It's not arrogance. It's just the painful realization that you're watching the movie in HD while others are watching it in much lower resolution, and there's no way to make them see the details you see. The first temptation, the most seductive and destructive one, is to mold yourself. You look around and think, maybe if I talk less about this, if I laugh at jokes I don't find funny, if I pretend to care about topics that seem empty to me, I'll finally belong. And it works, for a while. People accept you better when you're wearing the right mask. They invite you more, they include you. You get those approval smiles you wanted so badly. But there's a price you pay in silence, away from the eyes of those who approve of you. You lose contact with who you really are. Nietzsche called this denying your will to power, that vital force that pushes you to fully be who you were born to be. Every time you erase yourself to fit in, a piece of you dies. You gain smiles and likes, but you lose yourself in the process. And the worst part? You know this. You feel it every night when the house goes quiet and you're alone with your thoughts, realizing you spent the entire day pretending. That physical sensation in your chest of having betrayed yourself in exchange for crumbs of acceptance. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize who's looking back at you. The person there is a construction, a calculated performance to please audiences that don't even really matter. And you know what the worst part is? The more you do this, the easier it gets. The mask sticks to your skin. You forget where the performance ends and where the real you begins. Until one day you wake up and realize you don't know who you are anymore without other people's approval. You know what took me forever to understand? Most people aren't going to understand you. And this doesn't happen because they're dumb, bad, or ill-intentioned. It happens because they inhabit different layers of existence. There's something Jung noticed. Few people actually venture into the depths of their own unconscious, and this isn't a moral judgment, it's just a fact. Most people prefer to live on the surface because it's more comfortable, safer, less distressing. That's a valid choice, a way of existing that brings its own peace. They don't wake up in the morning thinking about the meaning of life or questioning the structures that govern their choices. They simply live, react, go with the flow. And it's okay for them to be that way. The problem arises when you expect these people to understand your concerns, your existential crises, your deep questions. It's like expecting someone who's never dived to describe the bottom of the ocean. It's not unwillingness, it's impossibility. They don't have the internal tools to process what you're saying. You can repeat it 1,000 times, rephrase it 1,000 different ways, use 1,000 examples, and it still won't work. Because the problem isn't in your communication. It's in the incompatibility of worlds. You're talking about nuances of color to someone who only sees in black and white. What happens is that you carry within yourself a need for understanding that will never be fully satisfied. The sooner you accept this, the less you'll suffer. Schopenhauer talked about the essential loneliness of human beings. This unavoidable condition that each consciousness is a separate island, incapable of completely merging with another. Even the people you love most, who know you best, will never fully inhabit your internal experience. They can get close, they can have glimpses, they can resonate on similar frequencies, but they'll never totally understand you. You can spend years with someone, share the same bed, the same meals, the same experiences, and there will still be parts of you that will remain unexplored territory for that person. And you know what's liberating in all this? Stop seeking total understanding. Stop thinking there's someone out there who's going to completely decipher you. That fantasy keeps you trapped in an impossible search that only generates frustration. You look for someone else who works like a perfect mirror of your soul, but that other person doesn't exist. They can't exist. Each person carries their own internal universe, with their unique references, their specific pains, their particular fears. So you keep trying, explaining, rephrasing, and you just accumulate disappointments until you realize the problem isn't the other person. It's the unrealistic expectation you placed on them. The weight of masks is real and accumulates over time. Jung saw something that makes total sense. He differentiated the persona, that social face we show the world, from the self, the true core of what we are. The persona is necessary, yes. You need it to function in society, to have your basic interactions, to move through the world without causing unnecessary friction. It's the edited version of you that goes to work meetings, family parties, casual encounters. But the problem happens when you forget you're wearing a mask and start believing you are the mask. When you spend so much time pretending that you become a stranger to yourself. The signs appear slowly. That tiredness that doesn't go away even after sleeping. That feeling of emptiness that no distraction fills. The realization that you're living on autopilot. You smile at the right times, say the expected things, perform your role perfectly, but inside you're dying. And the worst part is nobody notices. The people around you think you're fine, that you're adapted, functioning perfectly. They don't see the silent desperation of someone who's lost contact with their own essence. You become such a good actor that you fool everyone, except yourself. In the early morning hours, when you take off the mask, you face the emptiness of someone who no longer knows who they are without the performance. One thing that took me a while to learn. There's a crucial difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude can be nourishing, consciously chosen, a sacred space where you reconnect with yourself, away from external noise. Philosophers immensely value these moments of retreat. They see in them the necessary condition for creation and genuine self-knowledge. Nietzsche wrote better when he was alone in the mountains, away from the social demands that exhausted him. Chosen solitude recharges you. It gives you clarity. It allows you to hear your internal voice without the constant interference of external voices. But isolation is something else. Isolation is reactive. It's building walls because you're scared. It's locking yourself away because the world hurt too much. When you isolate yourself, you're not choosing to be alone. You're running from being with others. And that escape becomes a prison where you're both the jailer and the prisoner. You lock the door, throw away the key, and then stay inside wondering why you feel so trapped. The line between these two things is subtle but fundamental. One strengthens you, the other makes you sick. One is movement toward yourself, the other is escape from the world. And the most treacherous thing is that isolation often starts disguised as healthy solitude. You distance yourself to recover, which is legitimate, but you forget to come back. You get comfortable in the protection of your cocoon and lose the ability to deal with the world out there. You know something I learned the hard way? Not everyone deserves access to your depths, and understanding this is wisdom, not arrogance. You don't need to open up completely to everyone who crosses your path. Actually, doing that is a mistake that only generates unnecessary pain. When you share your essence with someone who doesn't have the capacity to receive it, you're not being authentic, you're being reckless. There's an old idea about free spirits, those rare ones who can dialogue at deeper levels of consciousness. These people exist, but they're exceptions, not the rule. Reserve your most precious truths for those who have ears prepared to hear, for those who have eyes capable of seeing beyond the obvious. Everyone else can receive more palatable versions of who you are, and that's not falseness. It's intelligent protection. It's like keeping your most valuable jewels in a safe and leaving costume jewelry in the display window. It's not dishonesty, it's a sense of preservation. You don't throw pearls to swine, not because the swine are bad, but because they simply have no way to appreciate the value of what you're offering. And when you insist on opening up to those who aren't ready, you hurt yourself twice. First, from the inevitable misunderstanding. Second, from the frustration of having exposed yourself in vain. Learn to read people. Notice who's really interested in what you have to say and who's just being polite. The difference is in the eyes, in the quality of attention. Some people listen to respond, others listen to understand. Save your depth for the latter. Look at the mistake we make repeatedly, seeking validation in the wrong places, expecting corporate work to value your philosophical depth, expecting superficial relationships to satisfy your hunger for real connections, expecting environments that reward conformity to celebrate your originality. It's like looking for water in the desert and getting frustrated for not finding it. Psychologists would say you're looking outside for what can only be found inside. The external validation you're searching for will never fill the internal void that only self-understanding resolves. You participate in shallow conversation circles hoping to find depth. You go to noisy parties looking for genuine connection. You post your most intimate reflections on social media hoping hundreds of strangers will validate you. And when you don't receive what you're looking for, you feel even more misunderstood, even more alone. Look for tribes, not crowds. Look for quality of connection, not quantity of approval. And especially, stop expecting systems and people that weren't made for you to suddenly recognize and embrace you. The company that hired you to follow processes won't celebrate your philosophical questioning about the nature of work. The family that values stability won't applaud your existential reflections about abandoning everything and starting over. It's not cruelty on their part. It's simply incompatibility of values. If you're enjoying this content, check out our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes, in the first comment. And there's another angle to this. Before anyone else understands you, you need to understand yourself. It seems obvious, but most people skip this step and go straight to the part where they expect external recognition. Jung dedicated his entire life to the concept of individuation, that arduous and necessary process of becoming who you really are, of integrating your shadows, of knowing your patterns. When you do this internal work, when you really understand yourself, something curious happens. The need to be understood by others naturally decreases. It doesn't completely disappear, because we're social beings and connection matters, but it stops being that desperate hunger that makes you accept crumbs of attention. You stop seeking from others what can only come from within. You stop expecting someone to complete or validate you. You become whole on your own, and then you can connect with others in a healthy way, not a dependent one. Start a reflective journal where you write without filter, without fear of judgment, because nobody else will read it. Analyze your behavior patterns. Notice when you're reacting on autopilot. Have honest conversations with yourself, without an audience, without judgment. This is work nobody can do for you. Therapy can help, books can guide, but in the end, you're the one who has to make the internal journey of deeply knowing yourself. And when you truly know yourself, when you understand your fears, your desires, your contradictions, you stop needing so much understanding from others. There's an art to communicating depth without diluting it until it becomes water. And you need to learn this if you want to survive in the world without erasing yourself. I'm not talking about simplifying your ideas until they lose all meaning. I'm talking about finding language bridges, about translating complexity in a way that others can at least glimpse what you're saying. Nietzsche was a master at this. He wrote in dense aphorisms, loaded with meaning, but accessible enough to hook those who were ready to think. He didn't need to use academic jargon to transmit profound ideas. He used metaphors, images, stories that stuck in the reader's mind. You can do the same. You can be deep without being hermetic. You can speak difficult truths without using jargon that pushes people away. The form changes, the essential content remains. It's like translating poetry. You lose a little in the process, but you still manage to transmit the essence. And sometimes, just sometimes, you manage to plant a seed in someone who was ready to question, even if that person doesn't have words to thank you in the moment. Maybe months later they come back and say that what you said kept circling in their mind, germinating slowly until it finally made sense. Communication of depth isn't instantaneous. It's planting trees. You don't see the immediate result, but years later the shade is there. You know what real maturity is? Accepting that not every relationship can handle total depth. You can genuinely love someone and still not be completely understood by that person. You can have valuable friendships that work on more superficial levels and still be important in your life. The mistake is demanding that a single person, or worse, that all people, fill all your connection needs. Relationships have different functions. Some exist for light fun, others for mutual growth. Some are for questioning life together. Others are just for sharing a coffee without weight. Stopping demanding that each bond be deep in all aspects frees you to appreciate what each connection can really offer. That friend who doesn't understand your existential crises but makes you laugh when you need it. Valuable. That person who listens to you talk about philosophy at 3 in the morning. Rare and precious. Both have a place in your life, serving different purposes. You don't need to abandon anyone just because the person doesn't completely understand you. You just need to stop expecting them to understand what's beyond their capacity. It's like liking someone who's terrible at math but excellent at art. You're not going to ask them to solve equations. You're going to appreciate the paintings they make. Relationships work better when you accept the real limitations of each person and work within them. When you find someone who really resonates on your frequency, you know immediately. You don't need to explain too much. You don't need to translate. You don't need to simplify. Words flow and make sense. Silences are comfortable instead of awkward. There's a mutual recognition that doesn't require performances. Psychologists would call this synchronicity, those meaningful encounters that seem orchestrated by something greater than mere chance. It's like you're both reading from the same invisible book, understanding references that nobody else gets. These people are rare, incredibly rare, but they exist. And when you find them, it's almost scary how easy the connection is. You don't need to try hard to be understood. You don't need to repeat or rephrase. The person already got it, already understood, is already vibrating on the same wavelength. And the key to finding them isn't desperately searching on every corner. The key is being open and visible enough so that when they cross your path, the recognition is mutual. You can't force these connections, but you can position yourself so they're possible. Participate in spaces where deep people gather. Go to philosophy lectures, reading groups, discussion meetings about topics that truly interest you. Expose your thinking through writing, art, any form that allows other free spirits to find you. When you become visible by being authentically who you are, the right people find you. And then you realize that all that loneliness was worth it because it led you to these rare connections that feed your soul in a way that 1,000 superficial connections never could. The misunderstanding you feel can become creative fuel if you know how to channel it. Nietzsche transformed his loneliness, his isolation, his pain of not being understood into philosophical works that spanned centuries. He died without recognition, misunderstood until the end, but left a legacy that still resonates today. That internal pressure you feel when you can't express yourself, when your ideas get stuck in your head with no outlet, when you realize nobody around you understands what you see. That pressure needs to go somewhere. If it stays trapped inside you, it'll make you sick. But if you learn to direct it toward creation, it becomes power. It can become writing, where you finally say everything you can't speak. It can become music that expresses feelings that words don't reach. It can become any form of expression that doesn't depend on immediate understanding. The beauty of creation is that it transcends the need for explanation. You put out what's inside, and even if nobody understands it now, it exists, it's materialized, it's no longer trapped inside you causing pressure and anguish. And sometimes, years later, someone stumbles upon what you created and finally understands. They read your text and think, my God, this is exactly what I feel. They hear your music and cry because finally someone expressed what was mute inside them. But even if that never happens, even if your creation never finds an audience, the act of creating has already freed you. It's already taken out of you what was suffocating you, and that's already enough. But watch out for the ego trap. Just because you think differently doesn't mean you're above others. Philosophers fiercely criticize resentment disguised as moral superiority. That posture of someone who thinks they're more evolved, more conscious, more enlightened than the ignorant masses. This is one of the worst prisons you can build for yourself. First, because it generates even greater isolation. You put yourself on a pedestal where nobody can reach you. You become that insufferable person who only talks about deep philosophy and looks with disdain at those who like football or reality shows. Second, because it feeds bitterness. You start seeing others with contempt instead of compassion. You become cynical, bitter, that person who complains about everything because nothing is up to your high standards. And third, because it's simply not true. You're different, not superior. You see certain things that others don't see, but others see things you don't see. The guy you think is superficial for liking to talk about cars might understand mechanics at a level you'll never reach. The person you judge for watching soap operas might have emotional intelligence you haven't developed. Your way of processing the world isn't better. It's different. Maintain humility. Maintain curiosity about what you still don't know. Maintain respect for people who choose to live differently from you. Otherwise, you become exactly the type of person you criticize. Closed, arrogant, incapable of learning from those who are different. What you need to build within yourself isn't defensive walls that prevent any connection, but internal fortress that allows selective vulnerability. Jung saw the self as this organizing center of the psyche, that stable core that anchors you even when everything around you is chaotic. When you're truly centered in yourself, when you know your values and live them independently of external approval, you can open up to others without fear of losing yourself in the process. You can be misunderstood without disintegrating. You can hear criticism without crumbling. You can maintain imperfect relationships without betraying your essence. The difference between fortress and wall is that fortress protects you, but has gates you can consciously open when you want to let someone in. Wall traps you along with everything you're trying to keep out. Wall is rigid, inflexible, born of fear. Fortress is solid but has movement, has choice. Work on your internal fortress through deep self-knowledge, through practices that connect you with yourself like meditation or journaling, through clear values that guide your choices even when nobody's watching. When you have that fortress, you can dance between moments of openness and moments of retreat without losing yourself in either extreme. You can be vulnerable without becoming dependent. You can protect yourself without becoming closed. That's the true emotional autonomy you're seeking. And this reminds me of something else. There's no final solution to this dilemma between authenticity and belonging. It's a constant dance, a balance you remake every day. There will be moments where you'll open up more socially, participate more, expose yourself more. You'll go to that event even knowing the conversations will be shallow, because basic human connection also matters. And there will be moments where you'll need to retreat, protect yourself, reconnect with yourself away from the noise. You'll cancel commitments. You'll be alone. You'll prioritize your inner peace above social expectations. There's an old idea about eternal return. This notion that life is cyclical, not linear. Nothing gets resolved once and for all. You don't choose once and for all between being authentic or being accepted. You choose every day, in each situation, how much you'll reveal and how much you'll keep. And this changes depending on context, your energy, the people involved, what's at stake. Accept this fluctuation without dramatizing it, You didn't fail just because you needed to wear a mask at a family dinner to avoid unnecessary conflict. You're not being fake just because you dialed down your intensity in a casual conversation with acquaintances in the elevator. You're being human, navigating the complexity of existing in a world that doesn't always have space for your totality. Wisdom lies in knowing when it's worth fully revealing yourself, and when it's better to keep your essence to yourself. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every truth needs to be told. Choose your moments. Real freedom arrives when you stop needing to be understood. It seems paradoxical, but when you abandon this urgent need for external validation, you paradoxically become more understandable, because now you're speaking from your truth, not from an edited version of it that you think others will accept better. You stop contorting yourself to fit into others' expectations. You stop measuring each word, fearing misunderstanding. You simply are, and whoever can keep up, great. Whoever can't, their problem, not yours. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." And that means exactly this. Stop trying to be who you think you should be to finally become who you really are. Final authenticity doesn't come when everyone finally understands you. It comes when you understand you don't need everyone to understand you. When you deeply internalize that other people's opinion of you doesn't define who you are. When you stop living your life as a constant performance waiting for applause. It's a scary freedom at first, because you lose that constant validation that made you feel safe. But it's also the only real freedom that exists. The freedom to be yourself, completely, without asking permission, without waiting for approval, without needing someone to legitimize you. You become your own authority, your own validation. And then, ironically, the right people start to understand you better, because you stopped trying to be understood and started simply existing. What if the greatest understanding you need is your own? What if you stop waiting for someone out there to decipher you and start doing this work yourself? What if being misunderstood is simply the price of being real in a world full of performances? Think about this for a moment. Maybe the question isn't how to make people understand you, but how you can understand yourself so deeply that others' misunderstanding stops shaking you. Maybe the answer isn't in communicating better or finding the right people, although those things help, but in accepting that you'll always be, on some level, a mystery even to yourself. And that's okay. You don't need to have all the answers about who you are. You don't need to explain yourself perfectly to anyone, not even to yourself. Life is process, not final product. You're always becoming, you're never finished. And maybe peace doesn't come when you're finally seen completely, but when you stop needing to be seen to know you exist. When your existence stops depending on others' recognition. When you become so solid in yourself that it doesn't matter whether others understand you or not. You exist regardless of audience. You're real, regardless of witnesses. And that's the final freedom you've been looking for all this time. Not the freedom of finally being understood, but the freedom of no longer needing to be understood to feel complete. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't just another video about relationships or communication. We're talking about something bigger, something that touches who you are at the deepest level. If this made sense to you, if you saw yourself in these words, leave your like down below. It helps more people who need to hear this find this content. And if you want to go even deeper, consider becoming a channel member, where we have exclusive content for those who really want to do this internal work seriously. We'll see you in the next video.